Good evening, participants. I'm Yashwendra Singh, Executive Editor of ETCIO, and I welcome you all to this very timely and topical panel discussion on ensuring business as usual in times of COVID-19. The unabated spread of coronavirus pandemic has led several businesses to either halt or limit their operations. While every function in an enterprise has been impacted by this medical emergency, the role that seems to have the most riding on its shoulders is that of the CIO. In order to deal with the challenging times, many businesses have started exploring strategies to ensure their operations stay afloat. Though it is difficult to accurately predict the extent of damage that the pandemic could cause, businesses still need to quickly identify the new challenges associated with keeping the operations running and come up with effective solutions. The enterprise IT leaders need to devise proficient means for file sharing, communication, and access to applications such as CRM or ERP while ensuring data security, among other challenges. In today's session, we have with us some of the top industry experts who will throw light on how COVID-19 is impacting businesses and how they are tackling the corona crisis. So without any more ado, let's set the ball rolling. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Sushant Rabra, partner KPMG India, to deliver his address. Over to you, Sushant.
Thank you so much, Yash, for setting the context. And good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for giving your time and your attention to this very important session. My privilege to open this session with an opening note. We will be spending about 10 minutes going through the key facets of what we know about this situation and what are the emerging thoughts on how technology leaders can respond effectively to this challenge. So I'll start with the presentation. And this is a topic which does not need a lot of introduction. We are all living, breathing, listening to this day in and day out. So COVID is one of the largest challenges that mankind has faced, and it has unified people across borders because the impact seems to not respect any nationalistic borders and is being seen in developed as well as developing countries. So some of the statistics are something that you might be already aware of. So it's, as of now, almost 300,000 cases and rapidly expanding. I will actually draw your attention to the next slide. While there is a lot of humanitarian crisis which is associated with COVID-19, there's a large impact which is being put on the economy as well. And this is not unexpected, given the state of lockdowns, change in expenditure patterns, people staying at home. There is no industry which is untouched by the impact of this particular pandemic. Now, this is quite visible based on the GDP growth across various countries, as well as the manufacturing activity across key manufacturing hubs of the world. It has steadily declined and is facing one of the biggest challenges in almost 100 years. If I was to sort of deconstruct the impact of this epidemic on businesses, I would talk about broadly three themes which are important. The first theme is of a supply shock. Most of the businesses today depend on well-integrated global supply chains to provide them raw materials which they process. But given the nature of the lockdowns and the pandemic situation, there is significant supply shock which businesses are facing. They have limited or no availability of raw materials. There is a regulatory uncertainty in terms of when these measures or these controls will be taken off. And some of the suppliers are also invoking force majeure clauses, therefore putting the entire supply chain into a disarray. If we come to the market side, the market itself has significantly shifted. The markets are in bearish mode. We all know about what is happening to the global stock exchanges today. So it's very hard for capital markets to function. And consequently, the financial markets and the capital markets currently are under severe stress. And that is not good news for a business which is facing these shocks from multiple dimensions. So we have been, for example, talking to many of our clients who are talking to us about how to manage the liquidity challenges as they are going through this particular situation, or how do you manage the working capital throughout the entire market value chain. And finally, if I talk about the demand has also significantly shifted. Now, the demand for, of course, essentials is skyrocketing because of people stockpiling some of the essential goods, and FMCG companies are, in some sense, in a better state than others. But for most of the other manufacturing organizations, demand has significantly subsided or been put on hold. The services sector is even higher hit because the service sector, in some sense, is a derived sector. So the demand for services has also either seen flat or declining trend as we have been seeing this entire saga unfold. So there are lockdowns and quarantines which are impacting the demand, and digital and e-commerce channels are acting as the primary gateways for many of these products today to reach out to the country. Now, uh, while that broad themes is all what we understand, many of the businesses are saying, let's evaluate how this risk landscape evolves, and we will take a call on that. Now, our view is that while that might work for some time, but given the timeline that we're talking about here, which could be few weeks, and in some cases, people are talking of 1 month or 2 month situation, wait and watch is not exactly the right strategy for businesses, because then you will be responding to the challenges which are being thrown at the business operations. Uh, there are three things that businesses can do today which can help them remain relevant and grow as they move into the future. So if I was to break this down, I would talk about three areas. First is, what can you do today? And many companies are already doing it. What is that you need to do to plan for the new normal when we are outside this entire situation, and we are looking at markets and consumer demand coming back in? You will realize that the demand and the market dynamics would have been fundamentally altered. The market landscape will not be the same as it was about 2 months ago. And that is the new reality that all of us will have to live with. And I'll illustrate as we go forward in this presentation. And finally, if I even look forward than that, not just next 3 months, 6 months, but if I was to look at next 2 years to 5 years out, we have to talk about the future and say, how do you ensure that as an organization, you are managing the landscape well? How do you ensure that your supply chains and business models of the future are resilient enough to handle such shocks? So I'll start with what is that business leaders today are looking at doing. So the first and foremost, they are looking at how do we run the core operations? What are the core systems, core deliveries, supply chain that need to happen? Now, that is the business continuity plan, which many of you are familiar with, which people are invoking today. But more importantly, I think we are under focus on the communication part. All of us have large number of employees and customers that we serve. At this juncture, more than our business partners, they are also fellow citizens who are in distress. So how do we work with those employees and the customers will set the stage for long-lasting relationships. As they say, the best of the connects are forged in a crisis, and this is one of the biggest, right? The third theme that we want to highlight is we need to stabilize our core systems and operations and processes. Now, this is often easily said than done in a situation like this, but we will need to deconstruct our entire operating model, look at each of the component of the operation and systems, and then see what is that we can do to stabilize it and bring it back to an acceptable level of delivery. Right? And finally, this is a fast changing landscape. Every day we hear a new regulation, new guideline. Every day we see countries taking a different tack at maintaining or containing this entire epidemic. So therefore, as business leaders, we need to have our governance mechanisms which can very quickly evaluate and respond appropriately to those changes. In some of our client cases, we have seen that it's an immediate reaction that happens to any such situation, and that can cause impact subsequently down the line in terms of tax liabilities, non-compliances, or decisions which have been taken to optimize things on the short term, but would cause significant long-term pain in terms of supplier relationships and so on. The second theme, of course, is to plan for the new normal. Already, I would say this particular crisis has made work from home mainstream. It has made digital channels of commerce mainstream, digital banking mainstream. It has been the most, I would say, unintended consequence of this large social experiment which is happening, where everybody is primarily working from home or select places. On the other side, from a demand perspective, this will fundamentally alter the demand for products and services for your customers. They will never be looking at things in the same vein. If they are buying the same product, they will have different expectations from the feature set that they will have. And I will draw a parallel to what happened in few other similar crises which happened in the past. If you look at World War II, if you worked at the Great Depression, when the economies came out of that, the demand for products and services, that profile was very, very different from the economies that went in. And in that sense, we have to now plan for the new normal. And from the future perspective, all of our organizations need to stress test ourselves, our finances, and our supply chain and inventory models to make sure that when a black swan event like this hits us, there is certain degree of responsiveness that we have towards that. Over the last few years, we saw that the operating models across the economy moved towards models which were, I would say, wafer thin on margin of error, because high degree of optimization was built into it, and that is one area that people will relook into as they move forward into the future. I'll just move forward and say that that was all towards business, but as technology leaders, what does it mean for us? As technology leaders or CIOs, I would say you actually wear 4 hats, right? The first hat is actually of a business leader. You are on the table when all these decisions about the future of the organization are being made. And therefore, we will need to have a point of view about what do we do in the future in our markets, for our clients, for our products and services, which will make us sustainable and thriving in the future. Second, as I mentioned earlier, the role of technology has moved to the forefront. Today, all of us are having this conversation. All of us are working from wherever we are working because of the robust technology investments that have happened over the last 10 years. This will accelerate the pace of these new ways of working, new employment, and new engagement models. And therefore, organizations will look at CIOs to be the tech evangelists who can bring these ideas to the core and make sure that these ideas create value for the organization. The third one, and maybe that is the role you are already playing in the last 2-3 weeks, is of a business enabler. Organizations will come to you first to ensure continuity of this business and maintain the tensile technology landscape as we respond to this. And the fourth is that while you are all of that, you are, before anything else, the leader of your technology teams. These are the teams who are standing by you in this difficult hour, and they will be stretching themselves and they're looking up to you for direction as we are going through this situation. I would just like to sort of pick up 2 themes, and then I'm looking at the timeline. So essentially, going forward, what are the themes which will be important for technology perspective is, first, inward looking. This will actually accelerate the focus towards digital workforce. If any of you who had a challenge about creating a business case for automation, digital labor, I think once we are over this, you will see much more acceptability about what does digital workforce or digital labor mean for our organization. There will be a fast track shift out towards that as we move forward, because the businesses which are continuing today are heavily dependent on that. Second, within that, you will need to look at the work use cases and how technology can enable and fast track those use cases in the future. There will be adequate emphasis on security and policies to handle such a scenario in the future. And finally, you will be required to look at new capability build outs from a tech perspective and from a work delivery perspective. Now, so far, these has been video conferencing, collaboration, and bots, but going forward in the future, this will mean many more things which can bring work to be delivered anywhere, and not only services, but how can people collaborate across the world to deliver on those value chains, which will be service and manufacturing together. Finally, more outward looking, your businesses will expect you to look at digital technologies to address your customer demand. And this will mean what are the new ways of reaching out to the customer on self-service or digital sales? What is that you need to do to add to your own product or services to make it more digital friendly? Many of us are in industries which are classical industries. So this is the time to start thinking, how do we make these products or services more as a service, or changing the business or financial models around that. And this will also open up new opportunities for all of us to address in the market space. So this, in my opinion, is definitely a wake-up call for the organizations that we have been putting a lot of focus on operational aspects and not probably investing enough in the long-term resilience and long-term investment on digital and technology. So hopefully, once we are over this, you will see much more investments, much more focus, and much more board level attention coming on the technology function, because technology is the underpinning lever which is right now making everything go forward. And there will be adequate focus on business continuity planning, risk management, and the likes. And finally, I would want to say that you will need to make a plan which is next 2 to 6 months on what would you do to expand your capabilities in digital labor as well as customer digital spaces, as well as next 2 to 5 year plan on how will you innovate and create new business models supported by digital. So with that, keeping a view on the timeline as well, I would like to just pause here and open up for any questions that people might have.
Thank you for that insightful presentation, Sushant. I mean, you say that the full impact of this scourge is yet to be felt, but we are already witnessing disruption across various aspects of our lives. So, I mean, the scenario certainly is very scary. But then you also say that wait and watch won't work, right? So let's hear straight from some of the top technology and C-suite leaders on what they think about the entire corona situation and how are they mitigating its impact. So coming up now, participants, is a very interesting panel discussion. Please allow me to introduce our esteemed panelists to you. We have with us Mr. Biren Ghosh, Country Head Technicolor. We also have with us Mr. Srinivas Iyengar, COO, Reliance Nippon Life Insurance. Mr. KRC Murthy, Head of RTB Function, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Mr. Anil Porter, CIO IGT. And last but not the least, Mr. Archie Jackson, Senior Director, Head IT and IS for Incido. Good evening, everybody. Let's start with you, Anil sir. Corona pandemic has completely disrupted businesses. We have to agree that nobody had planned for such a scenario. So what kind of an impact has this situation had on your role as a technology leader? I'm sure none of you would have felt this kind of a pressure ever. So how do you see this impacting your enterprise in general and your role specifically?
So thank you, Shwinder. Yeah, I come from the travel industry, and we're the worst affected. Travel and tourism is the worst affected, and we see a negative at least 2 quarters. And we're not saying negative in terms of losses, we're saying complete erosion of top line. Today, what we see, where international flights have been closed down, domestic is getting closed at midnight today. The date is for 31st of March. Obviously, government will review how things are going to shape up in the country, and obviously we have a very high population density, so we have to be very cautious. So whatever that is happening, nobody could plan to such an extent or to such an event, because in any of the contracts or any of the contracts that we sign, there's always a condition of force majeure, which typically talks about act of God or epidemic. You don't size your businesses or size your infra, size your services for how do you deal with such force majeure condition. But yes, when such situation comes in, you have to cope up. You have to kind of really pull the extremes, throttle, to ensure that the infrastructure that you have developed, the investment that you've done over a period of time, are leveraged maximum to support and keep the head above the waters. So all our workforce have been enabled from work from home, obviously with limited endpoint last mile issues. Uh, we do have some degradation in efficiency, but one is that obviously because the business levels are low, we are able to cope up and kind of deliver on a lot of our contractual and other service requirements and deliverables that we have for our customers. But one important element that we see, and they were quite nicely captured in the presentation, was about how do we go forward? How do we, what are the new things that would happen? And one definite thing which has been going in my mind, and I kind of seen that echo in the presentation, was that we'll have to kind of now balance out between centralization and decentralization, because it is the decentralization which has really helped organization to float. People who are completely centralized are finding it very, very difficult. And that's one change that would happen. And the organization will kind of re-architect themselves. New modes of
Sure,
service
sir.
delivery, self-service. So those things will kind of get the maximum, I would say, uh, memory or top the town recall and discussions that would happen. And this is how the organization would finally kind of reorient themselves to cope up with it. And because
Sure,
the
sir.
recovery will be very low or very long, uh, so they'll be very, I would say the funds would be very discreet to come. It will not be that easy to come. So that's how my view to it is that decentralization will become a focus for a lot of organizations.
Sure, sir. Sure. Great input, sir. So moving on to you, Mr. Biren, you are the head of Technicolor in India. You handle the P&L for the company. How do you view this entire situation impacting your business in India, and how critical do you think technology would be to mitigate the impact of coronavirus? Because generally CEOs and CEOs don't consider IT to be core, core to their business. But do you think this is going to change because now that IT, do you think would make all the difference in keeping business as usual?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to restrict my comments to the visual effects, animation, and the games business of Technicolor globally. The reason that we have been able to scale and become the world's largest company in these fields is a technology-driven pipe and a set of solutions that actually empower artists everywhere. So 10 years ago, when we started out here in Bangalore, we were about 200 people out of 4,500 people in this business globally. Today, we are 6,000 people in India out of 9,000 globally. So we really are kind of the technology enabled engine for artists to create all the big productions that you see that have won us Oscars and Emmys and many other things. So, the data that goes between our pipes in our own global network is, more than 20 gig at any point of time, daily moving up back and forth. We are in a tech park here where I think the next 4 buildings combined don't have that kind of data transfer. In a more let's say, where there's non-visual, then we don't have that heaviness of load. So I think really the question today is that how do we use technology to disrupt this disruption that we are facing, right? And I think there's no time for invention. It's very much like a war zone. And we are a business that's driven by clients. So all the big Hollywood studios, all the big game publishers, they need content to go on continuously. On the one hand, we're talking about shoots and films being delayed, but on the other hand, everyone is watching TV. So everyone from the advertising world that we work with and everyone from the content creation world is going to be hungry for more. And at this moment in time, security doesn't enable us to work from home. The solution to work from home is very, very expensive. It's almost not feasible. So if I was to talk to the government today, I would say I'm a labor intensive industry. If I talk to my creatives, they want me to be technology enabled, right? And if I talk to my clients, they're talking purely of creativity and quality. So I have to look at all of these paradigms and be in the sweet spot of those three things coming together. I think one of the questions that's going to come up is what are the future expectations of services going to look like in this whole new paradigm? And how much is that going to cost? And how are we going to make that happen? We are in a country where both the effectiveness and the cost of broadband is very tough. And for us to have images moving back and forth from homes is kind of a very, very difficult solution from a latency point of view. So one of the things that I think is really important is for us to come together as different industries and make sure that we actually coach the government to work with us in the new normal, right? There are lots of confusing advisories, lots of different people writing to us. Company affairs is writing to us. Health is writing to us. Industry and commerce is writing to us. Everyone's labor is saying, don't do this and don't do that. And these are actually very confusing from an employee perspective. And I think we really need to have the voice of reason between industry and government that make sure there are very clear, simple, centralized information that goes out to everyone. I think the point was made earlier that we have to look after the citizens that are our employees that are affected in this. And I think that we have already seen a great coming together of our partners, people that are vendors. We are one of the largest users of solutions from global companies like NVIDIA and Autodesk and Dell and HP and many others. And I think this technology community can really huddle together. Where work from home is possible today, it needs to happen. Where we need to come out with other solutions, that's really important. I think it's a time for innovation and not invention, because we need to take two things and make a third thing out of it in a war zone like atmosphere right now. I think even producing content in two places, and I'll summarize with that, producing content in different places is unnatural. It's like marriage. You need to make it work. It doesn't work on its own. And I think what we need to do now is to figure out how to do the unnatural things more naturally.
Sure, sir. Let's move on to Mr. KRC Murthy. KRC, sir, hi. Like
Hi.
Mr. Biren said, hi. Like Mr. Biren just said, it's work from home is the new normal. But for a regulated industry like yours, I mean, for a bank, this is not the new normal, right? It is such a regulated industry that it's really tough to ensure that everything is as usual when somebody works from home. So how critical, how challenging is this for your organization, or do you also see this as a blessing in disguise? Because I remember during the time of demonetization, a lot of people took to Paytms and other modes of payments. So do you think that with Corona, people not going out, do you think digital banking would now pick up for you?
Yashwendra, thank you so much for having me here. Pleasure to be here. I think you touched upon the right points, and you have also answered a couple of my the answers which you wanted from me. So I really like Sushant's presentation, where he touched upon the key points, and he also made it a new normal, the way we are working right now, right? I think no one envisaged out this kind of situation. It's mother of all BCPs, right? We plan our BCPs for a limited set of users, limited set of systems, and what is available. Today, what we are witnessing is 100% BCP kind of a situation. And as you rightly mentioned, for a regulated environment like us, it is more difficult to keep the lights on in these kind of situations. We are seeing the requests coming from the business units, the frontline users, to work from home, which were never envisaged to be. Especially for example, if it's a FX dealer or a trader, how do you enable them? These are some things which you never plan for, right? While we have already made the necessary arrangements to make them work from home and keep the lights on. It's a very challenging situation. It actually tests your entire infrastructure and application bandwidth. It stretches you to the core, and we are tested. IT is being tested at this point in time, how well we are able to support the business. Coming to the point of blessing in disguise, yes, I think we take this opportunity of using our products which we have built for our customers to use. For example, Kotak 811, our flagship product, we wanted them to use it to the utmost. We have whole suite of products available in that. Currently we are seeing it being used completely, and we are very happy about it, that our products are being used. The online payments have increased, the UPI transactions have increased. All my online systems are seeing the entire stretch of it. From that perspective, we are really happy that we are geared for this kind of situation, and we are able to cater to our clients, and we are able to stand up in these times and provide the kind of services which are supposed to be. The challenge here is for our internal users, where everyone is working from home. That's where we see a stretch. But however, we are able to manage and keep the lights on. We are part of the essential services as the government has directed, and we have no choice. But some of our guys who work on the branches have to go to the branch and keep the lights on for others to come in. But coming to technology, I think it is testing time. We are able to stand up to the situation so far, and going ahead, we will plan for much more such situations. and this will actually enable us to pump in more for technology and look for new products.
Sure, sir. Sure, definitely. So for this, for you, it has been, every dark cloud has a silver lining. With people taking to your digital services like never before, this has been
Absolutely.
really a blessing in disguise for you.
That's right.
Right. Moving on to you, Archie, sir. What is the call for action from the management for you? I mean, what are the top 2 or 3 things that your management is asking you to do? I remember there was a time when CIOs were asked to open up new revenue streams, do more with less. Are today's asks different from the earlier ones, or are they the same?
In context to the current scenario, which is COVID-19, I would say the scenario, although it's a a kind of a outbreak across, but as an opportunity that we can see across all industries, across all verticals, is to relook the processes that are already there. And uh, as a technology leader, the priorities remains the same, irrespective it is the enterprise or uh, servicing the clients or working the operations out of the industry from a work from home scenarios. The 3 primary asks from the managements are always to ensure the security of the client's data and information, and since the current scenario is being working from home, the dependency largely lies on the ISPs. And what we see as a future prospect is innovation coming up from the ISP that could be more into fiber or more into kind of an ILL kind of a services to end users or home users. That can be an opportunity coming in, and the availability of our services. So the availability as that has been there over the office's premises, similar kind of an availability of our services should be there while users are working from home. So that's largely as a business containment. But as I could see from the statistics that has been shared, only a 45% of the organizations were successfully be able to enable the work from home in this current scenario. And I'm really glad that from our industry, our organization standpoint, we are 100% enabled, and our business as usual is operating without any discontinuity and 100% availability. And as an opportunity to relook as the organizational process is not only limited to the BCP, it's the overall processes from the policy standpoint, from the asset inventory standpoint, and like the data collection standpoint. All of that, it gives a huge opportunity to the end users as well as the IT leaders. And especially one of the key challenge that we could see during this kind of a lockdown across is new employees who are joining in, as well as the users which are, or the employees who are moving on to another organizations. So that kind of a I mean, it's everybody who joins a new organization, they have high expectations, and there's a set of processes and procedures that are enabled by HR, operations, and IT to meet and create and enable the services. So enabling a new joiners experience equally as it has been in person while this is locked down, that is something that really calls for an innovation. And also disablement of the services and IDs, and also offboarding once if there are employees who are onto a notice period, disablement, and also getting the client specific data captured and contained within the environment. That's also something that calls for an interesting thought process.
Great. So, Mr. Srinivasan, what are your expectations from your CIO, from your technology leaders in your enterprise? What do you expect them to do during these times? What's the mandate from your end to them?
The first mandate that we have is to ensure that how can we run the business continuous, which would mean that how smoothly and effectively we are able to transition from work from office to a work from home. As rightly said, that less than half the organizations are actually prepared for a true BCP. Now we are talking about 100% BCP across. So the first thing, and this is in any BCP scenario, the first important thing that I feel, is to accept what's the reality of the situation, find out what is the weaknesses, and then try to address. Just invoking the BCP is more a pep talk rather than the actual. So, for example, if you have 70% BCP, how do you ensure that you get to 100%? That's been our critical challenge. So, for example, we test BCP regularly. So we have certain number of all critical users across every functions who are moved out very smoothly. So that's about 50% of the population. You could stretch very comfortably to the next 30%. The last 20% comes in two or three types of challenges. One is your network when you work from home is able to connect your resources within the organization. Sometimes it calls for a simple thing like additional licenses on your VPN. More often than not, you discover when you run the BCP that you have to first scramble and get your VPN licenses. Second is to ensure that the most important is for a financial services industry like ours, it's not 100% work from home. What happened? 90% or 97% of my revenues actually come from customers which involve certain face-to-face interaction. How so? While over a period of time we have moved to digital, whether it's a digital sale, digital onboarding, digital collections, is to see that how do you ensure the last mile is taken care of. So ensuring that piece was the second big piece for us. And the third is this whole communication piece on any work from home becomes the biggest important parameter. And we were very cognizant of the fact. How do you enable things like video conferencing where you could connect with all your people across? Something like what we are doing for this seminar, which would have been like all of us would have been sitting face to face. Now we are all doing on a webinar. How do you convert this on a 9 to 6 type of an environment in the organization? For us, we identified these are three critical pieces and we started addressing each one of them. We went with, we first was as we got into this BCP, increase the number of all the VPN licenses to ensure that 100% of the people, you can take the laptop or a desktop home, but you should be able to connect easily. Second, ensuring that people were all on the some or the other conferencing network, ensuring that simple tools could be deployed and make that as a part of your inherent business of day-to-day working. Third, in an organization like ours, when you, for example, you write a policy, you need to interact with the customers. Now, if it's not going to be face-to-face, how can you record the call so that that becomes an evidence for in the subsequent period? It's a situation normally you may not use when it is not a BCP. But when it's a BCP, you have to come across some, these are the new things that we went into. So these were the three areas that we started. That made the difference in moving from to a 100% successful BCP. And as we speak now, we have 750 offices across the country, and all of us are connected. But having said that, the most important thing in our industry, especially in an insurance industry, is two. One, unlike a banking where people will run to a bank when they have to sit at home, but still they will want to do some e-transaction. And insurance may not come up to that level of priority as a banking. How do you still manage to get your revenues ring fenced when for a person, an insurance comes priority number 90 out of 100 things that he has to do? That's a very important thing for us to, which I call as a softer aspect. That's one thing that we have fortunately been able to ring fence to a decent extent. And the last and most important thing is the call center. One of the things, I was just on an industry call a few minutes back. The biggest thing that's every organization looks to is all the BC or 2 or 3 call centers that you had across the country, all of these locations have gone into lockdown. How do you ensure things like where your call center executive can be at home, connect remotely to their call center and take the inbound call? Simple thing, that's true work from home, even for your call center, for example. These makes a difference. And we have been working on all of this. I wouldn't say you are 100% there. I would say that you are 90% plus there.
Thanks, Srinivasan sir. Moving on to you, Mr. Viren. How would IT budgets get impacted because of all this? You know, it's anyways tough for CIOs to get the desired budgets. Do you think IT budget could become collateral damage because of Corona?
I think basically we need to look at two things. One, how do we shift workloads around? And for that, I think we require more agility in the system and the network. So the irony of fate today is that the most up and running part of our company and our ecosystem of studios is our studio in Shanghai. They're running to full capacity. They were completely closed. And currently we're looking at getting more people in there to in fact take the workload of the closures in Bangalore, etc. We had almost just after Bangalore, we also simultaneously, that New York and LA have been shut down. And there we've been able to enable the work from home solutions rather more quickly for some of the simpler tasks. Whereas here, actually, we are not able to do that because enabling 5,000 people is not possible. So if I have a 1 gig connection, for example, I can only enable people to work, 30, 40 people to work, 50 people to work from home. I need that for 5,000 people. And so I think from the point of view of your question, the budgeting of IT will also have to figure out what are the kind of transformations that we are going to have to create in order for this to become efficient. At the end of the day, everything happens at a price. And for us, IT is very, 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 very heavy. So if you take a movie like The Lion King or 1917, you perhaps are aware that to render one frame of the film, every single frame is an average of 32 hours with massive data centers behind it. So there is no one that I know anywhere in any industry that uses computing power in order to create the outcomes that every single individual of ours requires. And therefore, from that point of view, these are not workloads that you can shift to the home and you can do it remotely, etc., etc. It's tough enough doing it just as a B2B within the 6 to 8 locations that we have globally. So I think from that point of view, the investments in IT for us is a given. I mean, I think, in the content industry, there are very few companies that have spent over $3-digit million like we would have just to get people up here in India up and running in the last, time that we've been here. So this is a never-ending story. It's a very, very capital intensive. It is very solution intensive. As you know from the TV screen that you buy and the laptop monitors that you buy, that the number of pixels increase every year and the content creation becomes more and more complex every year and the workloads become heavier every year. So even though you have a new software today that is 5 times more efficient than 5 years ago, for the person sitting to create that work, his intensity of work and difficulty of work is the same. So it's never ending. Our biggest spend is technology. And for our industry, the most important thing is if we cannot amortize that cost within 2 years, then it doesn't make any sense because the technology is outdated.
Sure.
I have 5,000 people or 6,000 people working for me right now, but I might have that many old computers because under STP, I got all those machines over here, but I have to keep them for 5 years, but in 2.5 years, I can't use them anymore. So for us,
Sure.
it's a complete given that we need to have maybe new policies of giving this to CSR or letting these computers go home to stand by as a BCP just in the case of these kind of exigencies. And of course, STPI has allowed people to take machines home now. But I'm talking about a new way to look at the transformation of this industry. If we are going to have an increased investment in technology, if anything else, technology has always been an upfront conversation, but security and technology go hand in hand in that new normal.
Sure, sir. Anil, sir, how should CIOs plan their budgets going ahead? I mean, what are the learnings from a budgetary perspective for CIOs? More chunks should go towards BCP. How should it be? What kind of an allocation do you see CIOs making going forward?
I think this event will teach us all different aspects based on what we're going through, uh, what our priorities were. I think the biggest priority for all CIOs and all business leaders will be how do we continue to run? How do we continue to be uh, alive? Uh, like, for example, when we talked about call center and Srinivasan talked about it, how difficult it is in the current environment where you kind of centralized call centers, you've invested so much into telephony to give you so much of insight, whether it is loggers, whether it is real-time sentiment analysis and all those stuff that people were going about. I think with such life events, you come back to basics, and that's where CIOs and business leaders really need to decipher and look at very plainly the basics of your business. What does it require to run it? And once you start looking from a basics fundamental perspective, there'll be a lot of strip down, which eventually will happen. And this year, when I say this, not the current financial year, but the next financial year, I don't. So we won't even get up begging bowls. Leave aside going out begging for budgets. So with taking out complexities, ensuring that if you're able to run this, how will you run it with this kind of experience? And what life teaches us is that there will be more difficulty going forward. That's what the rule of the life is. So what we've gone through or what we're going through, we'll have to prepare ourselves for even a bigger eventuality. But I think fundamental is look at basics, do a lot of strip down. How can you work? How can you have more decentralized operation while still having a centralized control on service delivery or quality that you need to deliver with security? And when such situation arises, how can you run the business and be visible or be alive? I think that's where it is. Budgets are something I don't think anybody will get it for next year. What is required just to keep you alive is what you'll get. And in travel, it's completely life-changing event for us. That there could be a time when planes will get grounded over the world. I don't think so anybody could think that all aviation can be grounded. And
Sure, sir.
these are extreme life events. So a lot of
Sure.
thought process do go, a lot of good points were covered as part of the presentation. And once you stripped out of budgets, you've got nothing and you still like to deliver, you will kind of put your midnight oil or juices on your head to maximum use it, and will come up with
Sure.
some innovative use cases, which will again
Sure, sir.
kind of.
Sure. Sure. KRC, sir, do you echo Mr. Anil's sentiments? No budgets for you as well in the new fiscal?
Yeah, I do echo that, but however, Yashwendra, I think the priorities will change now, right? I also see it as an opportunity where the management will understand the focus of technology, right? From my perspective, I can say our bank has always, from the top down, they have always been investing in technology, always open to invest in technology. We were one of the front runners in investing on the right products and especially technology. I think this will give us more opportunity to invest on our core system, stabilize the systems more, increase our capacity. It's going to definitely happen, and I'm pretty, positive about it, Yashwendra. This probably in some way it's a blessing in disguise. Again, I would say that I would get some more budgets out of it and to stabilize my systems. So I see it both ways. See, the revenues are going to be under tremendous pressure. If you have heard the finance minister's broadcast just few minutes back, there's a huge pressure on banking right now for the next 3 months, right? They have waived off all the charges, online charges, ATM charges are waived off, no minimum balance. So this is going to really hurt the revenues of the banks, definitely, and that in turn will definitely somewhere have an impact on our budgets. It's a cascading effect. So but I'm very positive about it, Yashwendra. I'm going to get my budgets approved.
Great, sir. You're sounding really confident. That's really nice. Archie, sir, your thoughts on your budgets?
Yeah, so see, BCP, this is something that is already in place by default for any process that is there in an organization. However, 100% BCP or 100% continuity of the business over a long-term period, that is something that people or organizations need to look at. So over a period, what scope the organization or the kind of particular business has, the risk appetite of that business is to work partially or let's say 50% operations or scale up to 100%. That would actually decide the percentage of the business or the budget allocation to the future BCP. From the organization or my industry standpoint, I'm very happy and glad that we are at a very good posture, and we already are operating at 100% BCP, where operations is completely as is, operating from work from home. And however, there would definitely be more allocation in terms of uh, controls and more enhanced procedures in terms of the connectivity, environment, more operability, more seamless operability through work from home. So that level of, I mean, the percentage may be a bit like between 5 to 10% additional into the BCP area. However, things are smooth and fairly operational.
Sure, sir. Srinivasan, sir, we've always talked about how important it is for CIOs to collaborate with other C-suite members and vice versa. Do you think this is the time for such a collaboration to bring back business growth? And how can an IT leader seek collaboration with different C-suite members and vice versa during such times? Your thoughts on this, please?
At these times, collaboration becomes even more important because you are geographically separated from each other, and which makes it even more important to ensure that communications remain open, transparent, and consistent at all times, because only then the organizational goals get delivered. The CTO, the IT basically responsibility here is to ensure first is to make the platforms available which can create a virtual office for all the CXOs to be able to come together. Second is to also provide various tools where they can proactively exchange information or decisions. A very simple thing could be how many of the CXOs would have a workflow whereby people can exchange formal decisions, because talking about the decision on a phone is different, but from an organizational corporate governance, recording those also are becoming very important. How do you ensure these two? Uh, Third one is to see that how can you help them to stay connected with their people, because the CXOs on their own may not be able to fully be giving you and sharing with you if they are not very clear back to back with their own teams and they are updated. I would say the IT plays a very critical role on all the three issues: ensuring a platform for communication amongst them, B, tool to ensure that all communications are also from a governance compliant form, and third, also enabling a tool by which their one downs or two downs or their team are connected in one cohesive, uh, should I say, cloud, whereby it becomes like a true virtual office where the collaboration increases. Because on its own, CXO themselves cannot exist by just having a discussion amongst them. It's an ecosystem of both. And that's my view.
Yashwendra, if I can pitch
Sure,
in
sir.
for 30 seconds on this, I think it's a very
Sure, sir.
valid point which you have brought up. The collaboration among all the CXOs. I can vouch, especially the BFSI industry CXOs are very well connected. I'm part of one of the groups where we discuss and exchange a lot of ideas, thoughts. Who's doing what, etc. Let me tell you, there's no one hides anything. They come up, the issues are discussed openly. It's a very well collaborated community, and these are the times when everyone needs to collaborate and share the learnings and also save others if they have not gone through that. Give a heads up to them, and create a document kind of thing where really it helps everyone. I can say, you are aware that forget BFSI, all the CXO community is very well connected. So one of
Sure, sir.
the great thing, and applause, and kudos to everyone.
Right. No, definitely, sir. I know all CIOs are well connected, well networked. They are there for each other whenever, and such times are there. Mm. But within an organization, how can you fuel this collaboration? Biren, sir, I believe, such a collaboration should be a top-down approach. And given the fact that you are the country head, how will you ensure that, various C-suite members within your enterprise, within your company, come together, work together as a team?
So it is partly natural and partly by design. The natural part of it is that basically we have a role which is called the technical director. The technical director is a person that bridges the engineering, design, data science knowledge of the technical team together with the creative folks who are doing purely the creative elements of creating assets or textures or models or whatever the case might be. So what happens is that we have very distinct and different workflows. So over time, we have acquired many companies. So we have two different workflows in advertising. We have a completely different workflow for the heavy, very large films. We have a very different workflow for games. We have, we work with about 21 different games publishers, from Ubisoft to Electronic Arts to everyone. So we actually have got the learnings from all of these clients. When you work with all of them differently, we work within their pipelines, within their workflows, and therefore the computer graphics knowledge that we assimilate as a result is very helpful. So when we want to create something where we believe that we want to create something which is more forward looking, which is lighter, which is more agile, we have these learnings that come from different people, and we have to work with them to invent that. How does this really work in terms of the organization? I think we basically have our internal group, which is their own group there. We participate a lot in industry forums. In fact, we help to run one of the largest industry forums where people come in from all different companies, from international locations and local places, because this is a constantly evolving, very, very fast evolving landscape. There is nothing that we do. There's very little that we do in 2020 that we did in 2015, because it's, you have to throw it out very quickly. So I think from this point of view, technology has a seat at the table, has always had a seat at the table. And the big conversations around any innovation is first the security clearance. So right now, even in New York, LA, and Bangalore, when we have to move forward, there are lots of little things that we could have done, using the conventional and unconventional solutions, but it has to go through that security layer, because the IP we are working on is $100 million IP for a client that actually been produced over 1.5 years, and not even one image or one single thing can go out of the studio in that sense, right? So this is a very big challenge for us, but for us, the cascading conversation is very easy. It goes up from what we require from the bottom up level, and also it is steered from top down. It is very decentralized. We try not to make sure that one follows one cookie cutter, and there is a lot of independence, a lot of innovation, a lot of elbow room given to each of the CTOs, CXOs in the group to make sure that all this happens. And then we have our actual central CTO group for our business itself is very, very small. It has a leader in LA and 3 or 4 people that coordinate with all of these other business-oriented CXOs. So it's a very large community that is very active.
Sure, sir. Anil sir, you've already touched upon this, but just to take the discussion ahead, there was a time when all the CIOs were consolidating their IT infrastructure. Everything was getting centralized. With employees spread across, that strategy today seems to have backfired. What are your thoughts on this? What should be the new IT strategy going forward? What lessons have CIOs learned from Corona that could reshape their IT strategies going forward?
So I think one of the key focus that CIOs have been doing over the years, because they were kind of overwhelmed with the keep the lights on concept, and that's what has fueled the cloud adoption and all. So all CIOs have been like investing, fortifying, cementing their data centers, kind of making close to something which is indestructible, having 5 nines kind of uptimes. While it's still there, they still built to last. Point is that end of the day, you need people, the last mile, which I've been talking about, to ensure that the business gets transacted. Unfortunately, that aspect got also kind of glued or overwhelmed by centralization. It had its own advantages, but this one single event cannot have or will not kind of change the direction of CIOs, that they need to kind of completely go toward decentralization. But yes, there has to be some kind of balance which needs to come in, that if at all there is a situation like this, and what we've been seeing in the world over the last 2, 3 years, 4 years, there are natural events, natural calamities that are impacting, which was only to one region or one country. There are geopolitical events that are impacting. So businesses alone are not just driven by fundamentals of a country's economy. Being part of a global village, we do get impacted by geopolitical events, calamities, and this will only going to increase with the way that we have been abusing our natural resources. So there has to be a balance between centralization, BCP plans, and the last mile delivery.
Sure.
How do we kind of maintain the decentralization? Also, don't strike it off, and
Sure.
also to ensure that the infrastructure needed in the last mile, how do we kind of improve it without diluting any of the compliances, whether it is loggers, whether it is verification, all those aspects, so that you conduct a business with security and ensure that you are maintaining that balance again. So it's again, whether life is all about balance, business is all about balance, and CIOs need to look this more philosophically than actually getting into the drawing board and kind of redesigning things. So that's what my
If I
perspective
can
is.
just, Yashwindra, if I can just add one point.
Sure. Sure,
See,
sir.
the biggest impact on budget that I see is that every company will now be forced to plan their software and hardware for any employee, assuming that he or she is going to work from home. What is one important thing that we have not realized is with this BCP, it's opened up a huge confidence amongst both the working population and the employer population to say that productivity can still be high by working at home, right? And this would mean, and given the fact that people have been caught so unaware of this at this time with 100% BCP, people would like to ensure that at a time, something like 25% of your resource on a quarterly basis will work from home as on rotation is not a far-fetched idea that I see happening. It's inevitable, and especially we all heard people cribbing about allow me to work from home, allow me to work from home. Now employers are forced to create this situation because of whatever it is. People are working from home. More stories of success, equal productivity, even when you work from home in almost many of the industries, if not all. That's emerging. That will create a demand structure, and IT, CTOs, and CFOs have to be ready with the budget to be ensuring that you create this paraphernalia ready for your people. Just like many of the people expect a 5-day week to work, many of the people are going to insist at the time of joining, do you allow work from home? And that's the type of paradigm shift we leaders have to be ready and make budget and solutions available.
Yashwinder, I'll just add one last
Sure,
point
sir.
in the
Sure.
discussion. So there was an element that ISPs will have to do some innovation, and I think this event will bring 5G revolution in a much more commercial deployment and usage, because there were talks, because the telecom industry was going through a huge crisis. It is still not out of that crisis, but this event will have a perfect business case for 5G adoption and 5G deployment and adoption in the country, which will again
Sure.
kind of in that balance and help organization be really, I would say, as policy and practicality allow work from home.
Sure, sir. We've already shot past the deadline of an hour, but the interesting, this discussion is so interesting, don't feel like closing it. But we'll wind up with one final question, just one comment from each one of you. This scenario will continue for some time, that this is what, it seems to everybody. With every passing day, it means loss of monies for business. How are you ensuring that there is minimal loss to your business? What's your strategy ahead? If I can ask everybody, starting with you, Biren sir, a quick comment from your end on this.
So we are highly engaged in two communities. We are highly engaged with clients. We see that all of our games companies, game publishers, game clients, they are actually working like there has been no interruption of their work because they are able to do that from home, and they're doing that very rapidly, and they expect that the same should happen. So we are making sure that we prioritize those clients that are up and running to make sure that we will prioritize their work as we get our workloads up from work from home here. The second community obviously are the artists. There's a lot of psychology involved in this. There are people that have gone away. We have about 25-30% of our teams that have gone away. We are going to all of us see completely shifting dates, right? Right now it's, let's say they're supposed to come on the first, but maybe next week it might go further down. So I think we'll have to modify the return to work protocols, the way that we actually make sure that each of them are going to make sure that we know exactly who has what broadband in their house and what kind of architecture they have, what kind of systems that they have. I think this is going to become a perfect science. Right now, it's a war zone effort. but that's going to become a perfect science. And I think that what's going to happen in the future is that we are going to see the enablement of each client will have to define what they want done. We really will work in that universe with them. And I do think that cash flow is going to become the big driver of the next few decisions. So I think the elephant in the room for all of us is that the longer that this situation continues and we aren't going to be able to generate the revenues that we had, then we are going to be having a big back pressure. I think the conversations of budgets, etc., will become passe. It will become, how do clients prioritize how they earn their money? How will they prioritize how we earn our money? How will we work with our supply chain, our vendors, and everyone? And for us, the biggest cost is IT, because it's hardware and software and all the licenses that get renewed, for multiple apps. So I think that's going to be big choice. I think cash flow will determine many things, and I think therefore more innovation and more prioritization and making sure that we at least keep the lights on. So this is not about the growth, and I think talking about the future is wonderful, but I think just making sure that we survive this period of the next 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks or months, I think is going to become everyone's priority for technology and for everything.
Sure, sir. Sure. Anil, sir, your take?
Yeah, so I think this will get over, whether it is 2 weeks or a month, as Biren rightly said. So it's not end of the tunnel. We're not going to see it's like everything will come crashing down while the stock markets have. But I think when it comes up with the intrinsic fundamentals of our economy, there will again be a huge rush and demand. It's not a gradual increase that would happen, because all businesses, whether in all industries, will go completely berserk in terms of kind of getting back to their glory. And it's good for all of us that we kind of lock down ourselves for a month, so that we kind of prevent the ultimate that has happened in Italy or in Germany or in China. And it's good for everyone, good for all businesses, everyone. We'll fly again and everybody will do good. But yeah, one has to learn out of these life events. Focus again, how do you kind of maintain that balance when you've invested good amount in data centers, in technology licenses, but look at if such situation arises, how do you kind of cope up, have policy changes. This will give some improvements or some saving also would happen over the couple of quarters in terms of if work from home is a reality, and by policy or by the demands of the millennials, it will have an impact on real estate costs also. So let's see how it copes up. How do we like come out clean out of this? How do we have a control on the epidemic that is going around? Stay back, stay safe, which will help you. And it's good time for all of us to really think and get a lot of time to think. Nobody is disturbing you. You're locked down into a room, think and kind of plan ahead. Thanks.
Sure, sir. Sure. KRC, sir, quickly, your thoughts?
Yeah. I think this situation has taught us to focus more at the untouched waters and think more out of the box and enable more of our services and users to be digitally enabled. That's what how I look at it as rightly pointed by Srinivasan sir. Things like or the teams like call centers or outsourced team of professionals who provide services to you. How do you enable them also to continue their services for your organization? You have to really rework your entire priorities and use this opportunity and learning and get your technology enabled.
Right. Archie, sir, final thoughts?
Yeah, we recently came out from a very good session in Amritsar that was on VUCA. So talking about strategy, my take is strategy. In this current scenario, strategy takes a back seat, and it's more of a execution that we imply onto. So a bimodal approach where we ensure what we are planning as a long-term scenario, and parallel quick decision making and how we execute priorities at a short-term goals instead of having a long-term approach. That's what I would say.
Sure. Srinivasan, sir, your final thoughts. We've got a lot of questions coming in from our participants. We'll open up the floor once Srinivasan sir is through with his comments.
Yeah, interesting thing in my industry is it is situations like these which also reinforces the need for insurance amongst the entire population. So while you would not wish such a scenario to create a urgency, but the fact is there are two things I see from a strategy point. There's one set of customers who were always on the view that nothing will happen to me. All these example has seen that anything can happen to anybody, and it's always better to be protected. So that's a huge paradigm shift for this industry, not just in India, globally. And that will change the way I'm not approaching from an insurance company, I'm approaching from the customer. Because when such a huge paradigm shift happens in the customers, companies will realign itself to say, how can I get more agile and nimble footed with new products and services to reach insurance to a larger audience? How can the products be simple? And most important, from I see a clear tilt from an industry which is traditionally considering itself to be face to face, which will continue to be, but a large part of this will also start moving pure digital. That to me is
Sure,
the
sir.
biggest shift that this will bring.
Sure, sir. Great. Thank you so much for your input, sir. We'll open up the floor for questions now. I have already got so many of them. So this gentleman wants to know, how are CIOs measuring user productivity from work from home users? How are you managing security risks of work from home? Anybody wants to take this up?
If the organization is delivering or at a functional level or at a team level, you are delivering on the key daily matrices in the same way what it was yesterday, that means you are achieving your productivity. Let's not try to overcomplicate by saying there will be so many other MISs and so many other tools. It's very simple at the end of the day. If your output of the team today is the same as what it was when they were working from office, you are successful and you have achieved that. If not, look at ways how you can get there. That's how it is being measured.
Absolutely. I think that's the right way. I wouldn't pinpoint for an employee how much time he's spent just before the computer or whatever. As long as my work is done and my lights
Okay.
are kept on, I don't have any issues.
The next question is this the right time for business leaders to think of implementing cloud services, taking the support of AI, or using AR/VR in business communications?
So I'll take that question.
Anybody?
Cloud is nothing new.
Sure,
It
sir.
has been there. But cloud doesn't address the current situation. It is part of your data center, your 5 nines, or the uptimes that you supposed to deliver. Um, People centric, and every business is people centric. You can't take out the people out of it. Artificial intelligence is in its nascent stage of getting adopted into industry. There are some use cases which are getting deployed. Yes, they will see a lot of adoption, especially in call center or BPO or KPO businesses. Augmented realities, virtual realities will, and it is already seen in certain, say for example, automobile industry has the biggest use case for augmented realities and virtual realities. This will kind of, in some currency, again, industry specific, use case specific. And this is not that all of a sudden this will gain more traction. Traction will fundamentally come in
Sure.
terms of how to redefine your policies. How do you define your budgets in terms of where do you want to spend uh, end user devices or in your the cloud or data center or your core hosting systems. Uh, so that's the bifurcation that would happen
Sure.
fundamentally. Even to just link to the previous question in terms of measuring, I don't think so. Today, people will go about on what is the output or efficiency because this is something which is being trusted upon and nobody was ready for it. But yeah, this will kind of gain, and as in as decentralization model gain currency, there will be system which will gain, which will be put into measure the efficiency. Um, but needless to say, people are willingly putting 12 hours than a normal 8 hour shift just because they're at the comfort, and they do also psychologically and emotionally attached to organization that they work with. So measures and all come later when you have when you have do not have that kind of faith and relationship with the employee. Then these things questions come up. If employees are committed and you create that environment to for employees to contribute, these are not the priority line items.
So there is a question specifically for Srinivas Iyengar, KRC sir, and Anil Porter. What specific efforts is your organization making to keep the workforce motivated in these times?
So if I can take that, three or
Who
four
wants to
things.
go
Number
first?
one, I can go first. So three things. Number one, stay connected with your people. For example, all physical meetings are moved virtually. So we do ensure that the teams and the team leaders are being spoken to and on call at least once every day. So you know, there's nothing like talking and exchanging your thoughts and planning for the day. Uh, so mails don't work beyond a point. So that's one thing that I found it to be extremely effective. So for example, even our executive committee meets early in the morning on a video conferencing for an hour. Second one is, like I said, productivity. Give them the space to say that you have this space. I will not count and look at you on an hourly basis, but this is what you need to deliver at the end of the day. And third is to tell them that we will ensure that your health, your safety is important, and therefore this work from home has been enabled. We will get, as soon as the situation gets back to normal, we'll start work from office. These are the three ways I keep my teams together, and that's the best way to deliver.
So
Sure,
I
sir.
would say, Yashwendra,
Next.
I'm collaborating more with my team, right? One of the motivation is like I have allowed my teams to work from anywhere. They want to go to their hometown and work from there. There are people scattered across all the country right now. They are not located in one particular location. So that itself is a motivation for them. And they are very well connected. They are doing their job, and my operations are running smoothly.
So the last take, Yashwant, like while we do all of these, sending messages, calling up people, checking their well-being, and I think we come from the land of Bollywood. I don't know, have any one of you seen this movie, Jab We Met? And there's a scene where Shahid Kapoor comes back from his kind of sabbatical and goes back to business, where he says, "Ki apni lag chuki hai. We cannot go further down to this." So I think we all are in it. We are all in it together. Employees are not outside, and we kind of the leadership team being sitting in some seventh heaven. It's not. We are all in together, and we'll come out together. That's the reassurance that we need to give to employees and to customers, and be in touch with everyone, and just reassure that yeah, it will get over. Just stay safe. You just need to be alive to ensure that you deliver tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for, gentlemen. Thanks a ton for taking time off your busy schedules and participating. I would also like to thank all the participants for taking time off their schedules and being here. I feel
Thank you,
it was a
Yashwant.
very engaging session, and I'm sure all our participants found it worth their time. With this, I would like to bring the session to a close. Thanks once again, and have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Yashwendra.
Yashwant.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye bye.